Welcome, and thanks for taking the time to attend this session about the OET Reading test. As a requirement for all international graduates who want to gain ECFMG registration prior to the match, OET is something you will be thinking about in the next few months. The aim of this session is to make sure you understand what will be required of you in the reading section of the test, so you can prepare efficiently and confidently. We know you have many demands on your time and that ECFMG registration is a big deal to you, so we want to make sure this is as straightforward as possible. Today's session is aimed at IMGs who are already studying at medical schools in North America, but who still need to pass OET Medicine as an ECFMG requirement. We recognise that as a native speaker, you are already proficient in English. We're therefore going to focus on the aspects of the reading test we think you need to be aware about and might not be doing that regularly in the type of reading you do for class or as part of your medical course requirements. In turn, we're sure that you, knowing how important getting placed in the match is, appreciate that despite your English proficiency, you need to put some time and effort into the requirement to get the B grade needed from OET. All of the topics you see in the test will be familiar to you as physicians, and the skills you will need to answer the questions are the same skills that you utilize during your work. But don't let that make you complacent. We want to help you be successful so you can get on with the next exciting stage of your pathway to working as a qualified doctor in America. Following the advice we give you in this session is the best first step you can take. If you are joining this session and English is not your first language, please do carry on listening. The contents of the session will also be helpful to you, and you can find support for any language aspects which won't be focused on in this session from the resources on our website or from our partners via @officialoet on Facebook and YouTube. So let's start by covering the facts. The OET reading test contains 3 parts, which are completed in 2 separate sections. Part A is completed in 15 minutes, and parts B and C are completed together in 45 minutes. If you are taking paper-based OET, after the 15 minutes for Part A, your test booklets are removed, and the booklet for Parts B and C distributed. On the other hand, if you are taking computer-based OET, after the 15 minutes for Part A, the computer will submit the answers that you've entered and load the questions for Parts B and C. Part A includes a number of question tasks which require you to write down the letter of the text where the answer can be found, a word or short phrase to complete a sentence, or a word or short phrase to answer a question. If taking computer-based OET, the questions you will see are the same and the same type of answers needed, but you will type your answers as opposed to write them. All of the answers for Part A can be found within one of the texts, so it is essential that you copy the word or phrase with perfect spelling. Any errors will mean you score 0 for this answer. So don't be tempted to add any of your own words to the answer or change the grammar of the words you copy. Parts B and C are multiple choice questions. You must use a pencil to shade the answer you select when doing the test on paper, because this part of the test is computer marked. A 2B pencil is recommended because this is easily read by the computer. For computer-based OET, you will select your answer option by clicking on it. You can underline, circle, or make other marks as you wish on your reading booklet when taking paper-based OET. And for computer-based OET, you can highlight within the text and words in the questions, and you also have the option to strike out answer options to help you make your final choice, but this is optional. For ECFMG registration, you need to achieve a B grade, which is a numerical score of 350 or higher in your OET reading result. So how can you score a minimum of 350 in reading? There are 42 questions in the reading test, 20 in Part A, 6 in Part B, and 16 in Part C. Each answer is weighted equally, which means you can perform more strongly in one or two of the parts and less strongly in another, and still end up with 350 or higher. There isn't a set pass score for reading. Each test uses new texts and topics, which means that although the level of difficulty is roughly the same each time, there is slight variance. To ensure the test remains fair and to give candidates an equal opportunity to get the score they want in their results, the pass boundaries fluctuate slightly. While you are preparing for your test, aim for between 30 to 32 questions correct as a minimum to feel comfortable about getting 350 on test day. With your English proficiency, though, you should be able to score significantly higher than this, and we would encourage for you to aim as high as possible. And remember, there are no penalties for wrong answers, so answer every question, even if you're not confident about your answer. An answer has a chance of being correct, while an absent answer will always score 0. I'm going to spend most of today's session talking to you about reading Part C and guiding you through some approaches to take and how you can quickly improve your skills to increase your score in this part of the test. Towards the end of the session, I'll also give some tips about Parts A and B, but we think these sections of the test should be well within your current capabilities without too much effort. In reading Part C, the task is to answer 8 questions on 2 separate texts. So there are 16 questions in total. Each question is multiple choice, and there are 4 answer options to choose from. In paper-based OET, you shade the answer you decide is correct using a pencil. For computer-based OET, you click on the answer you decide is correct to select it. There are 45 minutes to complete Parts B and C, and we would encourage you to complete Part B in a maximum of 10 minutes, leaving you with 35 minutes for Part C. The answers for each question appear sequentially in each text and usually in one paragraph. And this means that once a piece of text has been read to answer a question, you will not need to read that text again. That you don't need to read beyond one paragraph to find an answer, and as a result, that you don't need to get the previous answer correct to be able to answer the next question. The paragraphs themselves will not be numbered to replicate how real-life texts are not numbered also. But the questions usually provide the location of where the answer can be found. So as an example, the question might read, in the second paragraph, ... So you know that you're going to be looking for information in the second paragraph. The types of text you read in OET are similar to journal review articles, which incorporate opinion, analysis, and case studies on topics which are of interest to healthcare professionals. As such, you should feel very comfortable with the contents. What you might be less comfortable about is not reading to pick out facts, but instead reading between the lines to understand what opinions the writer has and how he or she responds to the attitudes of the other people that are quoted in the texts. Once you are fully qualified and registered as a physician in America, you are expected to complete a number of continuing medical education credits each year, ranging from around 20 to 50 hours a year, depending on the state you are licensed in. You will be expected to read such journals and to think critically about the contents and how they relate to your practice. So reading Part C is excellent preparation for this. So thinking about reading Part C, let me ask you this poll question. What is your current approach to multiple choice questions? And there are 3 options for you to choose from. Do you focus on speed, so trying to answer each question in around 2 minutes? Do you focus on words, looking for words which are mentioned in both the answer option and the text? Or do you focus on knowledge, using your own experience to select the answer that you think will be right and then checking the text to back that up? What would be your current approach to multiple choice questions? So these three approaches may not serve you particularly well in OET Reading Part C, and here's why. It's easy to be affected by a ticking clock, and while you need to have an answer to all of the questions in the set time, putting too much pressure on yourself to answer the question quickly can lead to slips and inaccuracy. Under time pressure, even teachers can make mistakes when reading the question and choosing the correct option. You will need to find a balance between accuracy and efficient use of your time. Words which feature in the answer options may well be included in the text exactly as they are written or as synonyms, but this isn't enough to prove you have found the correct answer. In fact, they can be there to act as distractors, to check whether you have actually read the question and text carefully, or are leaping to conclusions because some of the information seems to match up. You need to be informed by the answer options, but not overly influenced by them when selecting your answer. In OET, your medical knowledge isn't being explicitly tested, and the test questions have been carefully written to avoid any candidate from any healthcare discipline being advantaged over another. To answer the questions correctly, you cannot rely on existing knowledge or experience you have with the topic. Don't look for the option which appears to be the most plausible. Instead, you will need to find the answer option which best answers the question which has been posed. So here's another poll question for you to answer. When you have chosen your answer option, which of these are you most likely to do? Are you likely to check the text for evidence that the other answer options are incorrect? Are you going to check your answer again, but perhaps once you've answered all of the other questions? Or are you going to check for any patterns in the letter of the answer option you chose against the other answers? So remember, the pressure of time can make you jump to conclusions or latch onto a word or phrase with confidence, but this confidence might be misplaced. It's a good idea to revisit all questions for a second check, and particularly any questions you didn't feel very comfortable with the first time you looked at them. And, if you can, to back up your selected answer by finding evidence from the text to prove the other answers are incorrect. Don't pay any attention to patterns. These are red herrings. There's nothing to say that one letter cannot appear more than others or in a repeated sequence when selecting answer options. Don't waste time on such things. So we're going to look at a few different approaches to answering Reading Part C questions, and I'll be asking you to share your thoughts on each one as we go. So I'm going to play a video of approach 1, and you will hear me explain to you what I am doing during this approach. I'm going to try to answer question 20. So first of all, I read the question to find out which paragraph I need to read, 5th paragraph. And I know this is the 5th paragraph, so I come over here to read this paragraph slowly and carefully. So let's have a look. Okay, so this sentence is telling me the context that until recently there wasn't a lot of ADHD diagnosed. Okay, and now I see that this has changed, particularly in America where we're focusing our attention. Okay, 2 factors. So changes to the diagnostic criteria from 2013 and the marketing that's been done of ADHD medications. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so this sentence is telling me that the new definitions were brought about, were fueled to broaden the market. Okay, and this sentence is saying the manufacturers had some influence in the expansion of the definitions. Final sentence. Okay, this sentence is talking about how there's some link between clinicians who are diagnosing ADHD receiving money from the manufacturers, the drug makers. Okay, so now I've read the paragraph and come back to the question. It's suggested that drug companies, all right, so the focus is on the drug companies. And my 4 answer options, let's just read through those. So this one's involved in the marketing. Okay, so this one is about the research and the diagnostic criteria behind the changes. Okay, so option C is to do with these incentives for doctors. I remember reading something about that. Okay, and this last one is about the speed of the changes to the criteria by the APA, and I remember that acronym in the paragraph. So now I've looked at those questions, options, I'm going to come back and start reading the paragraph again to look for my answer. All right, so thinking about that answer option, or sorry, not the answer option, the approach, how did you find it? What did you think of this approach? The approach essentially was to read the whole paragraph, then the question and answer options, and then the paragraph again. What did you think to that? Did you think that was a good approach to take? Not such a good approach to take? Just have a reflection by yourself for a few seconds about how that approach came across in the video. So this approach is pretty thorough, and it's a thorough approach to answering a question if you had unlimited time or there weren't other questions you needed to answer. While you don't want to let time concerns panic you, you do need to use your time efficiently. So following this approach is likely to mean you run out of time to answer all of the questions, wasting valuable marks. Reading all of the paragraph slowly and carefully first is probably a luxury you don't have time for. Read with intent. Have an idea of what information you are looking for from the question before you read. So now I have a video of a second approach, still looking at the same question. And again, after I've played the video, I'll get you to think about how you felt this was as an approach to take. I'm going to try and answer question 20. So first of all, I'm going to read the question and the answer options and underline what I think are key words. So let's have a look at the question. All right, so it's suggested that drug companies have. That's what the question's about. Answer option A. All right, so this is related to the marketing of medication. I know everything's about ADHD, so I don't underline that, and that they've been overly aggressive. Answer option B. Okay, so they influenced research in the reworking of the diagnostic criteria. Answer option C. Okay, so this is looking at changing the rules about incentives for doctors. And D. Alright, so encouraged the APA to rush through changes to the criteria. Alright, so the 4 ideas I'm looking at I've now underlined. So I'm going to come over to my text and start looking quickly for any of those words to appear in the text. So here we've got marketing. We've also got APA mentioned here. We've got marketing. What else have we got? Got the market again. Manufacturers. Alright, so there's definitely some mentions of marketing. If I look at this sentence again, it's part of one of the 2 factors mentioned. So just from checking over the keywords, I would say my answer option was A. All right, so have a think to yourself about that approach and how successful you felt that was. If you were going to answer a question, do you think this is the kind of approach that would work for you, or was this less successful? Again, just take a couple of seconds to reflect on that video and how you felt about it. The approach being to underline keywords in the question and answer option, and then scanning the text for those keywords and selecting an answer containing a match. So this is a common approach that candidates take when completing the reading test, and is again often an outcome of time pressure. It is a bit of a false friend. This approach is only skimming the surface of the text rather than getting under the hood of what the writer is communicating. You need to read with more selectivity, expecting all of the answer options to be mentioned in some shape or form, and not to be sidetracked by answers which seem so obvious that they can't be true, because they probably can't. So let's have a look at another approach. Again, there's a video to watch, and then I'll ask you to reflect on the approach after that. Okay, so I'm going to try and answer question 17. So I start off by reading the question. I notice that it's an incomplete sentence, so each of the 4 answer options is going to give me a way to complete this sentence. So checking again what the question is asking, I'm actually going to rewrite it in my own words, just to help me really understand what the question is asking. So I can change it to, why is the study of foster children significant? And that just helps me to feel really clear about what the question is asking. Okay, so now I'm going to look through each of the answer options, and I'm going to look for what makes them different to each other, and any words that seem similar. So obviously the inclusion of ADHD, I know that the whole text is about ADHD, I also know that this question is thinking about children, so words relating to child, children, I'm going to ignore from the words that I underline, because I'm just focusing on what really makes the options different. So just running my eyes over all the question answer options. I notice that this verb at the beginning is very similar in meaning, all sort of related to focusing. So I'm going to ignore those and now just look at each answer option in turn to try and work out what makes it different. So let's have a look. So here we've got difficulty of distinguishing ADHD from other conditions. Answer option B. So children who have complex mental disorders. Answer option C. Making a link between ADHD and the child's upbringing. And lastly, answer option D. The poor care given to such children. Okay, so now I've looked at what are the main ideas in each answer option. I'm just going to see if I can reduce that even further, and perhaps down to a single word or a couple of words, which will help me when I'm actually looking at the text. So from answer option A, I think the key word here is distinguishing. So it's seeing the differences between ADHD and other conditions. Answer option B is the complex mental disorders. Okay, so I can't really reduce that down much further. Answer option C, it's looking for some kind of link. So that's a key word for that one. And answer option D is looking at whether the care was poor, so poor care. So now with those four reduced ideas, that will give me a much clearer and easier picture for when I'm looking at the text. So I'm going to go over to the text now. I know I'm looking at this paragraph, and I'm going to read it with those four key ideas in my mind to see what evidence I can find to support or refute them. Okay, so what have we got? Recent study found, 3 times more likely to be diagnosed. Okay, so that seems to be a match perhaps for C or D, if it's linked to their foster care status. Also, children with ADHD were more likely to have another disorder. Okay, so that is a link with B, such as depression or anxiety. But depression or anxiety are not a good match for complex mental disorders. So for me, that's saying B is not going to be the right answer. Let's keep on reading though, double check and find out. So reveals the need for medical and behavioural services for these children. That's not really linked to anything. It could also prove the non-specific natures of the symptoms of ADHD or an altered state can easily be mistaken. Okay, so easily be mistaken for manifestations of ADHD. So that looks a good match for A. So I'm just going to consider that one a bit more and check if I can see anything to do with C and D. So foster care is mentioned in the beginning of the paragraph, but the language is very factual, the tone is neutral, there's no adjectives or words that suggest that the foster care is the reason or that there's poor care provided. So just checking this sentence again, could also prove the non-specific symptoms of ADHD can easily be mistaken. Yes, from what I've read, that is a good match for A. So A is my answer. All right, so that was approach 3. It was reframing the question because it was an incomplete sentence, and then working to limit the answer options to just the main concept, and then going to the text to find evidence for all of the answers. So just for a few seconds, reflect on that approach. What do you think of that? Do you think that's an approach that would work for you? So what this approach was doing was spending time on the question and answer options to limit the words in both to the minimum essential, so that when reading, these points really stuck in my mind and could immediately be discarded for being incorrect or something that I would put forward as a possible answer. But even when an answer was chosen as a likely option to be correct, the other answer options were still analysed for potential before making the final selection. And this can be a useful approach to take for incomplete or very short complete questions. So finally, we have approach 4 and one final video, which talks through this approach. I'm going to try and answer question 22. So first of all, I'm going to identify what the question is asking. Okay, so I can see it's what does the writer imply about addiction to ADHD medication? And I can see that the use of the word imply means that I'm looking at what opinion the writer has about addiction to ADHD medication. And because of the word imply, it's not going to be explicitly stated. I'm going to have to work it out from the words that are used and how the meaning is built up. So now I've understood the question, I'm going to go straight over to the paragraph and skim through it, seeing if I can find evidence of an answer. So let's have a look. So this is about other problems to do with opioid overdoses, prescription painkillers. Okay, so that seems important. The abuse of drugs used to treat ADHD is no less a threat. Back to opioids. This is still linked to opioids. Here we're back to ADHD drugs. Patients are changing from legally prescribed stimulants to illicit ones. Okay, and yet it's particularly prone to abuse because people feel it improves their lives. Can be abused by students. More work needs to be done. Okay, but that's not to do with addiction. So from what I've just read, I'm getting the feeling that addiction to ADHD drugs is quite significant, and there are some different ways that this is mentioned in the text to show that the writer is worried about this. So let's go now to the answer options and see if anything rings true with what I've just read to being a good match. So let's have a look at answer option A. Well, really, from what I've seen of the text so far, I would say the writer thinks this could become quite a serious problem. So I don't think it's going to be A. There was something about students, but I didn't feel like that was particularly mentioned as the main concern linked to addiction. So I don't think it's B, but I will go and double check that. Yeah, this one seems possible because there was certainly a lot of comparison between what's been written about opioid addiction and ADHD medication. So I'm going to put a question mark next to that one, come back to it. This is possible. Perhaps I didn't get a sense that the writer was questioning why people are addicted, but I'll put a question mark next to that one too. But now I'm going to go back to the text. C, I think, is my main thought at the moment. I'm going to go back to the text and see if I can find any more evidence to support it being C. So let's start again. So it's saying much has been written about this, but the abuse of ADHD is no less a threat. So that does still seem a really good match for C. It's suggesting that it's not received the same attention. But let's have a look at the other three answer options to double check. I feel like I've got the right one. So this no less a threat is also a good explanation for why it's not A, because it's saying it is going to be a big problem. All right. Now let's go back and have a look at the student line again, which I thought was linked to option B. So it's saying it can be abused by students. That's not a good synonym for more marked, and it's just mentioning students. So certain sectors would mean perhaps more than one different area, and we've only got students being mentioned, so I don't think it's B. And finally, D, is it not understood? So there was this part about more work needs to be done to settle questions, but this is around the diagnosis and treatment of ADHD, and I know our questions about addiction to ADHD medication. So from everything that I've read and understood, I would be choosing C as my final answer. Okay, so approach 4. What did you think to that one? This approach was analysing the question and seeking your own answer before looking at the answer option. So in just a few seconds, reflect on what you thought to that approach. So this approach used the question to direct the processing of the information contained in the text and avoided any distraction from the answer options before looking at the information critically in the paragraph without them. And it allowed one answer option to be elevated as the potential answer, which could then be confirmed, and the other options eliminated with little difficulty. And this can be a useful approach to take when the question is longer and complete. So we're going to look at a question together now, and we're going to work through question 16. And I'm going to ask you a series of poll questions as we go. So first of all, this word on the screen, object. What is another meaning for the word object as it is used in this question? Is it thing? Is it dislike? Or would you say you're not sure? So 3 options to choose for there. So the poll is up now for a few seconds. What is another meaning for the word object? Is it thing, dislike, or you're not sure? So the meaning here is to dislike, and it's really important that you make sure you are clear with the question and what it is asking you. Even if you're not 100% sure of the meaning of any of the words, you can still use your deduction skills to decide if the focus is positive or negative, etc. So looking at the answer options, I want you to think about what are the key words from the 4 answer options here. So what would you underline if you were looking at these 4 answer options? I'll just give you a couple of seconds to think about that for yourself, and then I will underline on the screen what I think would be a good idea. Okay, so in answer option A, I would say that need stimulants to cope with everyday life is important for that, understanding that answer option. In B, I would be underlining everyone has some symptoms. In answer option C, I would be focusing on most of this, to be honest, the grouping of imprecise symptoms. And in answer option D, I would underline treatments suggested by Dr. Barkley. Can you reduce these? So remember in the video that we looked at in approach 3, we reduced the words that we'd underlined down into the main differences. So again, just giving you a couple of seconds to do it first. Which of those, could you reduce those to just 1 or 2 words that really highlight the differences? Okay, so in answer option A, I think the real key words are stimulants and everyday. Whereas in B, it's this idea that everyone could have ADHD. Answer option C, it's about the grouping together of the symptoms. And in answer option D, I'd actually underline Dr. Barkley. So now we can see that we've reduced these answer options down to some key differences. In answer option A, stimulants every day. Option B, that it involves everybody having some symptoms. Answer option C, it's this grouping together of the symptoms that makes it different to the other answer options. And answer option D for focusing on Dr. Barkley. I'm just going to rub out those marks so we can not be influenced by them for the next question I want to ask. Ooh, there we go, a bit imprecise. It's coming. Okay, that's about enough. That's good. All right, so the last question I wanted to ask was, are there any words repeated in meaning across the answer options which would be good to ignore as you are highlighting or working out the difference between the 4 answer options? So So obviously ADHD is one of those. We can ignore that. The whole text, all of the questions have been about ADHD. Also, there's repetition of suggestion, implication, suggested. So those are repeated across 3 of the answer options, and therefore I can ignore those as well. So that's just reminding you of how you can further limit the answer options by ignoring certain words that are repeated. So what the tip is for this, what we've done so far, is to analyze the answer options to extract as much help as you can from them. Disregard any words which are repeated in meaning across answer options, and reduce keywords to the minimum possible so that you are focusing on precise areas of difference which will be easy to pick out when reading the text. So here is the text with the question and answer option next to it. Keeping those differences in mind, look through the text to see if you can find evidence to support one of the answers, and select the answer you think is correct from the poll that's going to come up on the screen now. All right, so let's talk through which answer was correct and why, and think about what evidence we can find to support it. So the correct answer was C, and we can see this in the final clause. I'm going to get my pen back up again, where it says the lumping together of many vague and I've just got the end of the text missed off, symptoms which could be causing the national phenomenon of misdiagnosis. So that is really saying that this is incorrect, and it's backed up by the tone of the rest of the paragraph, especially in line 5, where it says, under such subjective criteria, the entire population could potentially qualify. So this is what Dr. Saul is most objecting to, and that is a good match for C. Now, looking for evidence as to why the others are incorrect, let's use a different color this time. Well, for answer option A, he's mentioning in this line, although some patients might need stimulants to function well in daily life. So this is linked to answer option A, but he's not objecting to this. He's not saying that he disagrees with this, dislikes it. He's just presenting this as a fact that this could be true. And so that makes answer option A incorrect. Line 5, which we've already looked at, this bit about the entire population could potentially qualify. This is the writer, Dr. Saul's way of saying how ridiculous these subjective criteria are, that actually the entire population could potentially qualify. But this isn't the same as what's written in answer option B, which is saying it implies everyone has some symptoms of ADHD. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying that the criteria would make out that everybody does, not that actually everybody does have some of the symptoms. So B is incorrect. And also answer option D is incorrect. He's not objecting to the treatment recommended by Dr. Barkley, but her statement that it's a real disorder, which comes in line 2, because we know this because of where we have the word disagrees in the text. This is comes after the fact that Dr. Barkley says it's a real disorder, and Dr. Saul disagrees. So he is focusing on the criteria for diagnosis, not the treatment. Because as we've seen, he has said that some patients will need the treatment as recommended by Dr. Barkley in their daily lives. So now you have found the correct answer, which was answer option C. I want to know, if you chose the wrong answer initially, do you now understand why that answer was wrong? So you can choose from yes, no, not sure, or you were correct the first time. So while checking all 4 answer options might seem time consuming, the more you make this your regular practice, the quicker you will get at it. Plus, you can sometimes knock off some answer options as you are seeking the correct answer. By taking this step, you end up with a sense of completion and confidence with your final answer than just by picking one you think is right, going with it and moving on. And as native speakers, this is how teachers and other readers would complete this kind of question. So before we move on to spending a little bit of time on reading parts B and A, let's talk through some final things you can do to assess your current skills for reading part C and anything that you can brush up on. So when you have completed a practice test for part C, spend time going through your answers to understand where you went wrong. The reasons are likely to fall into one of these categories. Misunderstanding the question. It's really important to make sure you know what information you are being asked to find, but also so easy to go off on the wrong foot if you don't do this properly. The question will benefit from careful reading at least once or twice, and if it's helpful, and as you saw in approach 3, change the words or make an incomplete sentence into a question so you feel absolutely clear about what the focus is. Jumping to the wrong answer. Of course, this can happen because you haven't read the question carefully, but also because you've become distracted by something in the text which is also mentioned in the answer options. Remember, all answers are likely to be mentioned to a certain extent in the text, so you need to be clear that your chosen answer is a direct match for the text. Spending too long or getting stuck on a question. It is possible to lose track of time and get entrenched in solving one question, perhaps due to a stubborn determination to find the answer before moving on. But it's sometimes wiser to move on and accept that you will need to come back to it later. And this is perfectly okay. Make a mark next to the answer option you're leaning towards, so it's easy to come back to where you were in your thinking and move on to answer the other questions. This will also mean you feel less pressured when you return to the original question causing you difficulty, because now it's the only question left for you to answer and you can spend more time on it without any other concerns. Lack of stamina. So while you're less likely to find this a problem as a native speaker, the vocabulary choices and sentence constructions in the text are complex and may tax your brain. You will find you need to concentrate intensively during reading part C, and that is tiring. Your brain is likely to try to rebel against what you're asking it to do and take shortcuts. So reading this type of article daily as part of your preparation will train your brain to be more receptive to the intensity of concentration required, and you'll be learning more about healthcare while you're doing it. And finally, speed. We keep coming back to this, but you need to find your sweet spot between time efficiency and answer accuracy. Too slow or too fast can both be problematic. When you first start practicing, why not remove the time pressure until you can accurately answer all of the questions correctly, and then work to reduce the time you allow yourself until you can complete the 16 questions within 35 minutes. So I'm going to touch on reading parts B and A, and then give some final tips about assessing where you are currently at with your reading and what you might need to do some work on. But first of all, a couple more poll questions. This time thinking about reading part B. How many questions, when you take an official practice part B test, do you usually get correct? And there's 3 options to choose from. There are 6 questions available. So are you generally getting 5 to 6 correct, 3 to 4 correct, or 0 to 2 correct? And the same question, but this time about part A. How many part A questions do you usually get correct in official OET practice tests? So there are 20 questions available in part A and 4 options for you to choose from with how many questions you're usually getting correct in this part of the test. Okay. So thinking about reading part B, if you have mastered the techniques we've just been looking at for reading part C, then you will be able to easily apply them to part B, given that the texts are shorter and there are only 3 answer options. So there's less work to be done or ideas to deliberate over. To demonstrate this, I have a final video for you, which this time focuses on part B, but also this time is focusing on using the computer test format for those of you interested in what that looks like. So have a watch of the video and then I'll ask you about your thoughts after that. Okay, so we're going to answer question 2. So I start off by reading the question. The notice is giving information about, and that tells me that A, B or C are going to be one way of ending this statement. So I'm going to look through the 3 answer options to see what is the difference between the 3 of them. And quickly skimming my eyes over, I noticed the repetition of NG tube or feeding tube, and also that placement and placed is repeated. So I want to check for what is different between the 3 answer options. So looking again at what's left, if I ignore those words, in answer option A, it's to do with checking the correct placement. So checking is important here. In answer option B, it's the authorization of the tubes, and in answer option C it is which staff should perform the placement. So the 3 differences are checking correct placement, authorizing use, and which staff. Now I'm going to move to the text and start skimming the contents, looking for evidence to support one of those answers. So let's have a look. Okay, so that's the context of the risks if they're not used properly. And it leaves them vulnerable. Okay, but none of those are linked to our answer options. Okay, that's also not really linked to what we're looking at. Okay, so here, yes, only be carried out by a registered doctor or nurse. It's undergone training and deemed competent. Okay, and yes, this also mentions staff who should never insert. So those 3 pieces of information that I found there really are a good match for C. So I'm going to choose that one, but I am just going to go back and double check on that. For now, I'm going to cross out, strike out A and B. I don't think those are correct, but I'm going to have one last quick look to make sure I'm comfortable with my answers. So yeah, this bit does talk about the risks of incorrect placement. There's nothing really to mention how they are authorized, but the information that I found first of all is all about who should or shouldn't. So I'm happy with my answer, and I'll leave that there and move on. Sorry, I think I just did that bit without speaking. So the question that came up on the screen was to check whether you would have followed the same steps that you saw on that video, or whether you would have selected the answer option without a second check of the text. So you heard me say I was pretty confident it was C from the first time I looked at the text. Would you have chosen the answer there and moved on, or would you have followed the same steps and done a second check of the text? So it's fine to know your strengths and be confident about your ability, and I certainly don't want to suggest you start second guessing yourself or become doubtful when making your answer choices. But remember how time pressure can affect your competence to think in a calm and collected manner. While 2 minutes per question may feel short, the steps I took meant I was absolutely sure I was confident with my answer and can easily be completed in this time. Remember, you're unlikely to lose anything by being careful, but the opposite is true when you rush. So for reading part A, this is a very straightforward part of the test for candidates with your level of language proficiency. So rather than talk about strategies to follow, I'm going to mention the main reasons candidates lose marks here, so you can avoid these and aim for full marks in your test. So first of all, I'd like you to open up about any of these kinds of mistakes that you have made in the past when doing practice for reading part A. Have you made mistakes which are a result of incorrect spelling, from repeating words from the question, or were your mistakes caused by time concerns? So spelling is number one, and it's really critical in reading part A. In fact, it is the only part of the test when it is this important. In all other parts of OET, spelling errors are not so strictly judged. In reading part A, any spelling error, large or small, will automatically score you 0 for that question. So make sure you copy the word or phrase exactly from the text. You don't need to alter the word or phrase at all if you've chosen the correct words. If this means taking 2 to 3 extra seconds to run your finger under the word in the text while checking your answer, so be it. Do not waste marks this way. The instructions for reading part A mention to write a word or short phrase, and there's no need to write more than this, and you certainly shouldn't write a full sentence to answer the short answer questions. Notice the words which are used in the question and don't repeat them in your answers. They are redundant and actually demonstrate a lack of understanding on your part. In sentence completion questions in particular, they could end up in a penalty and forfeit of your mark. So to give you an example, if you had a gap fill question and you wrote sling for arm injuries as your answer, but the question said upper limb fractures should be elevated by means of a ... you would actually score 0 because you have not recognized what information was needed, sling, and not needed, arm injuries, because upper limb fractures has the same meaning and was already in the question. Time is definitely a factor for reading Part A, and even I feel under pressure when completing a Part A task, but this feeling of pressure does no good. Letting yourself feel pressured by time will only bring negative things to your performance, and most of them will equal silly mistakes and wasted marks. So block out the time when completing Part A. It will either be at the front of the room if you're taking the test on paper, or at the top of your computer screen. But don't keep looking at it or paying attention to the reminders when they are given of time remaining. You can do this. Have faith in yourself. Work steadily. Skip questions you can't answer quickly and to make sure you have an answer for every question, and then circle back to answer those questions at the end. So finally, how can you decide how close you are to being test ready in your current reading skills? So I'm making a handout available to you now, and this will be available for you to download and contains links to all of the resources I'm about to mention, so you can access them easily after the session. And we'll also make sure the handout is included in the recording when we email it through to you tomorrow. So first of all, take a practice test, but take the practice test in the mode you will sit your test, either paper or computer. If you're going to be taking a paper-based test, it's important to download the paper from the OET website and print it off. You need to familiarize yourself with working with the materials on paper as they will be in the test. For computer-based testing, you too need to familiarize yourself to working with the materials and the functionality available to you for this. And we have a handy video explaining what these are for the reading test on our website. For both modes of test, only use the things you will have available to you on test day. This means removing everything from where you are working apart from the papers, your pens and pencils, or your computer. Don't be too tempted to access any other materials such as your phone or dictionaries while you work. Think about your goal for taking this practice test. If this is the first practice test you are taking, then your goal is probably familiarization, to see what it feels like to work through the questions and how many you can get correct. In this case, don't bring time into it. Complete this first test without time constraints, so you can let your brain focus on understanding what is required to answer each question without undue pressure. However, if you are already familiar with the format and are in your test preparation phase, then completing the practice test under test conditions is sensible. Be strict with the time, set yourself a timer, but then turn the device face down so it doesn't distract you. Stop when the timer alarm rings, or at very least, make a mark so you know how far you had reached within the time limit and can score your answers appropriately. Once you have completed your practice test, mark it using the answer key available to you. For reading Part A, only give yourself a correct mark if you have included all of the words in the answer key. There are no marks available for partially correct or incomplete answers. Give yourself a pat on the back if you've achieved more than 32 out of 42 correct overall, but then go back through all your incorrect answers to find out why you made the mistake. It's important to do this straight after the practice test so you can recall the thought process you had at the time and can unpick what caused you to make the error. Now you know the correct answer. Can you understand why this answer was the correct one and yours was wrong? These mistakes should become your personal checklist for the next time you take a practice test, so you know not to make them again. And finally, build time to read into your daily routine to build up your stamina for test day. Read widely on different medical topics from the list of journals on the reading page of our website. You can also purchase further reading tests from the OET shop if you'd like to do further practice as you near test day. So don't forget to book your test. It may feel like there is plenty of time now before the end of year deadline for next year's match, but it makes sense to forward plan. Think about how long you might need to prepare and then book a test date for that time in the future. I have one final poll question for you to answer just before we finish. And this was to find out whether you feel more confident about OET reading now. And there are 3 options for you to choose from. And I'll leave that open just while I close off the webinar. So if you have any questions about OET reading or any other parts of the test, then do join me every fortnight for a live Q&A session, which is streamed through @official OET YouTube and Facebook. In those 60-minute sessions, I answer live questions candidates from around the world have on preparing for OET. So that's a really good place to answer any questions you might have. Additionally, you can contact us via Facebook Messenger, send us a question about your preparation, and someone in the education team will get back to you as soon as possible. For all other types of questions relating to booking your test, test day procedures and so forth, please contact our customer service team who are available 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday, via live chats, which you can access from the green help button, which appears on the OET website. Or they also have contact details via email and phone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found it informative, and we look forward to supporting you again soon. Bye for now.